wouldn't work.
I enjoyed the whole Victorian.
Overwhelmed with the joy of...
And Willie dressed up in a SS uniform and marched up and down the street.
Willie hadn't come in for lunch yet, and suddenly there were screams and yells, and he'd climbed on this wall before the concrete had set. He'd fallen, and all these breeze blocks fell on his back, and everyone, he'll be paralysed, all this sort of thing. But no, he wasn't. Climbed on Dad's greenhouse. He just went straight through, of course. Always just more daring than anybody else, and that just went on through.
Willie was a character, one out of the box. He had a real sense of adventure. Anything was possible. The only thing holding you back was your own issues,
He just saw the world through different lens, and he had this sort of dark sense of humour. He had a completely light sense of humour. He had a off-the-wall wacky sense of humour, obviously highly influenced by Monty Python's.
Gas canisters on the campfire.
I've never come across anything else like it in the world,
Cup of tea, sugar and milk.
I can't understand how things could just function in a sort of chaos, but it always somehow did.
Our story will start here for reasons that will become obvious. For the tourists, travellers and locals that make their way over the Taka Hill to Golden Bay in the northwest corner of New Zealand's South Island, a distinctive part of the landscape often signifies the end of a long drive. To the uninitiated, it's a large bit of rock that rises tall out of the bush. To the geologists and rock climbers of the world, it's a seam of limestone bluffs. In simplified rock climbers' parlance, it's a crag. But it's not just any old crag. Paynes Ford Scenic Reserve is located on State Highway 60, just 3 kilometres shy of Taka Township. It takes its name from the original ford that crossed the flood-prone Taka River. These days, a modern bridge provides safe passage over the water. For visiting rock climbers, the limestone landmark is a welcome sight that conjures up one word. It's a word that has become synonymous with New Zealand rock climbing.
Hangdog. Hangdog.
Hangdog.
Hangdog.
Hangdog.
For more than 20 years, Hangdog Camp, situated adjacent to the Scenic Reserve, has become an institution, and its existence is intrinsically linked to a network of people, circumstance, and karma. But essentially, it will be forever connected to one man. Willie Butler was your archetypical hangdogger. For Willie, it was never about the climbing. It was about doing things his way. It was about the journey, and it was about living life the way he wanted to live it.
So, Willie was born, fourth child, in Cradley, near Malvern, in Worcestershire. And I think Mum and Dad lived there. Dad had come out of the army and they'd moved there. He was setting up a market garden business. Willie was the fourth. Eventually they moved to Devon and 2 more kids were born, Peter and 2 years later, and then I was 3 years after Peter. And our family was the 3 big ones and the 3 little ones. And Willie was the top of the 3 little ones. And then Dad believed that the boys, you have to make men of them, so they must go to boarding school. It had to be, Dad was very military. And so the boys were all sent off to boarding school in North Devon, middle of nowhere, you know. But Willie was always very charismatic, even as a boy. And he was always, he was just leading. He was always doing something different. If he had a bow and arrow, he'd sharpen the ends of them, you know. I mean, he just pushed the boundaries all the way.
Of course, pushing boundaries was part of Willie's character, and the emergence of Hangdog Camp was born out of a man who simply wanted to help people have fun. All of us are in some way defined by our past, and essentially we all have a path to follow. Willie's path took him on a collision course with Hangdog. Was it an accident, or was it his destiny?
So teenage years were really totally rebellious, totally. You know, we had a family party one year. My brother had come back from the army, and suddenly there were screams and yells upstairs. Willie's caught in the bed with a girl. You know, the whole massive family argument. Willie takes off, and we didn't see him for 3 months. And when he came back, he shaved his hair, and he'd had these golden locks. And Mum was upset. And then the hippie years began, and he moved into Exeter with some friends, and we didn't see him so much at home then, you know, he was kind of a little more distant.
I met him in a flat in Exeter in England. One of the characteristics of him was that he had worn out trousers with a rip in the bum and no underpants, and that was, you know, what he wore. He loved cowboys, the whole cowboy genre, to the point that he actually had this beautiful fringed leather jacket that he wore. He loved American West Coast music too, of the 60s and 70s. He was very, you know, loved this other world, you know.
At some point he moved back home, and there was this big old shed, and Willie made that his domain, and it was number 1 shed. And he just moved in there. All his friends would just always congregate there because no one else had such freedom. He was like a magnet, you know, they did tend to follow him. And it's where I first heard the Grateful Dead coming out of number 1 shed. I remember it the first time I heard it, thinking how beautiful.
Washed up in New Zealand because he went to Australia to his sisters, was in Australia for a while with his sister and his uncle on farms, and then I visited him in Australia, and then he came to New Zealand with me.
It turns out New Zealand was perfect, you know, he could be wild and crazy if he wanted and it was acceptable, but he just wasn't acceptable in England, not really to my dad. He couldn't figure out who he was, and he certainly couldn't find it in England.
He went off on this shearing gang, and while he was there he saw the musterers coming in, bringing the sheep in on their horses with their dogs, and he said, that's what I want to do. And so that was really the start of his mustering career.
Willie had just arrived from somewhere in Canterbury, and he ran a mob of dogs, and he had a walking stick, and it looked like he'd just come down off the mountain with a pack of dogs hunting rabbits, you know, just ready for action. So here was a guy, you know, who wanted to do things, great sense of theater, sense of adventure is what I got, you know, and was interested in what you were doing, what other people were doing. It wasn't just about Willie.
This place happened because the fellow, Murray Irvine, who lived here, left the whole property, which included was about 40 acres, included the area up the back there, left it to the public trust, so it was auctioned. And Willie had always wanted this property. He used to drive past it down the road and say, that's the place I want to be.
I'm Patrick, youngest of three. When I was born, we were up the valley, up at the Craigieburn, and then you moved to Dodson's Road when I was about 4, a couple of years there, and then you moved here. So when Hangdog started, well, in theory, the auspicious date in 1994, I would have been roughly 9 years old.
I think I would have been about 15 or so when we bought the property. My recollection is that Willie came home one day and basically said, I've bought a house, we're moving.
Would have been about 10 or 11 years old when Celia and Willie bought the Hangdog property. Around that time, the climbers and sort of house truckers, general transient people all lived down at Paynes Ford by the river.
I hadn't done a heck of a lot of climbing outside, but I'd climbed indoors a bit, and I heard about a place called Paynes Ford, so I convinced my dad to drive me up there and drop me off. I was rope soloing on my Gregory, and some kids turned up, which happened to be Willie's kids, and they said, come down here and we'll take you climbing. So I went climbing with them for the day, and when we got back to their place, hoping to find Dad, who was going to take us back to where we were staying in Motueka, Dad, who sometimes does this, had disappeared for a few days and said to Willie, can you look after my son for, I don't know, might have been 4 or 5 days or something, I don't know. But so there I was, stranded at the Butler household. And this is prior to it being Hangdog or anything like that. So it was just, just some guy and his family who knew how to climb and that sort of thing.
We all knew there was some rock climbing that was pretty decent up in these parts. And it kind of filtered through Greymouth through the Taipatini Polytech outdoor course that most of us had done, like Steve Parker, Brent Hartshaw, Dean McKenzie, and myself. And then so once that course had finished, washed into town in about November of 1994, and you could camp at the Ford still, and it was quite social, and it was fairly busy.
Years beforehand, we used to camp down at the reserve, and it was quite a scene. Like, it was very bohemian and wild. There were house truckers there. Each year it grew and grew as the festival on top of the hill, the gathering, grew. And so to the point where it needed managing, and it got quite out of hand.
It was a summer scene, pretty much. Everyone came from all over the country and congregated there. And we were having massive problems with accommodation. So we used to be able to camp down by the river, which is now behind the gate. Then we had an arrangement with the TDC, and they gave us a plot of land for this busy period over the other side of the river.
And we ended up camping at the abattoir, over the abattoir yards, or the council yards next to the abattoir. Sort of a manky place to camp. And then I started to hear rumours, there's this farmer who's bought the property next to Paynes Ford and he doesn't mind people staying in his paddock.
Brent, Dean and Steve were camped up here on the front lawn, and they were like, it's a little bit out of the way, it's not so busy, it's not so hectic, and the family that's got the place, the Butlers, they're pretty okay with it.
We knew nothing about the climbing. We didn't even know the cliffs were there. And then the first thing was that 2 people camped in the orchard down there. And I said to Willie, what are those people camping in the orchard for? He said, they're climbing. Well, we didn't know anything about that.
A small group of climbers, they would have been, 19, 20, 21 years old. They came up and asked Willie and Celia if they could camp in the front paddock. That was fine. They did, and I think their payment was to take me climbing. As, I was probably a real nuisance to them. A kid who would sort of chase around after them after school and every weekend.
Obviously, it's a wee while ago now, and at that age, didn't have the full memory or comprehension of exactly what was going on. But it was definitely quite intriguing and exciting at that time. Sort of random guys turning up and pitching up on what was just the front paddock out there.
Doc decided they were going to shut the campground down at the reserve. And so I don't know how much talk went on between them and my parents, but at the same time as that shut, Hangdog opened officially. And so all the climbers moved up to our place. And that was that, really.
I mean, who would do that? It's their front yard, and then they just let everyone bowl in there and do their own thing, and, you know, it's not 20 people, it's not 10 people, sometimes it was 50 to 100, you know, and he just, yep, that's what I can do for everyone here that wants to come here.
Young males need to be able to strut their stuff in whatever form it is, in the street, on the deck, whatever. Which is why this skateboard park needs to be in the middle of town, and I still want to see the kids skateboarding in the street where they learn to respect the space of others, not sideline. Thank you very much.
Well, the community side was definitely well and truly entrenched with youth, because of course he had 3 sons growing up at that time. I think he had the first job in Golden Bay as the youth worker, and he started something called the Joint. That's right, it was the Joint. He organised probably the most inclusive of all the youth workers in the Bay who have ever been, and those organisations. His one was the most popular. In all the years I've been here, it drew the most youth, it drew the most interesting kind of rebellion, and he encouraged these kids to just, you know, question everything and challenge everything. And they did, and you know, it wasn't necessarily always popular. And after he finished that job, it never ever was the same again. It was never the same. He just did such a good job of it.
Willie started to climb then, and he really enjoyed it. And then he also was really interested in youth work, and so he started to give teenagers the rock climbing experience, and that became his reason for rock climbing and his reason for putting up roots.
And he wanted a lot of the local kids to be outside and doing outdoor activities and things, and he thought climbing would be a good one, so he wanted climbs that were often at a lower level than a lot of the people visiting wanted to put up. For example, some of the easy routes on the Little Lost Wall primarily is things to get the local kids involved in climbing.
A lot of people thought that Willie was a climber before he moved to Painsford. He wasn't. He had done a bit of scrambling in the UK, you know, on decomposing chalk cliffs or something, but no, he wasn't a climber. I actually used him as a belay slave when I was a teenager, and then so he started climbing a lot more and started seeing more development potential at Painsford. Then that led to the Little Lost Wall and these other beginners areas that are now that are so popular.
I didn't understand why he was going down this campground idea. Why would you do that? But that community, he had a sense of community, and only as I get older do I understand what a sense of community means. I certainly didn't understand that when I first started going up there or anything like that.
For all the craziness, there's a very switched on guy there. You know, like, it's easy to remember the crazy stories, but, you know, he did heaps for the community, and he was very onto it in how he managed Hangdog. He was just really into encouraging people into whatever they were passionate about, but particularly climbing, you know, and so there's a lot of community mindedness about the guy as well. Yeah.
Turned out he was brilliant with young people. I mean, I wasn't so sure about it, but he was, and testament at his funeral how many people said how great he was. But lots of young kids, blind people, old people, you know, and then all the sort of different factions in the area, the drama thing, all the Aunt Fanny's tea parties, just so many ridiculous things. And he was in all of it. I think he could have been on the stage, you know, I think he'd have been amazing, and I think he loved that bit of it too. And friends who did the drama thing with him said he just improvised all the time, didn't really learn his lines, but was just an absolute natural.
He was so funny. He was like a leader, but not a leader. He didn't want to be the leader, but he was very good at leading, at being very much the person to hold the space. We went to Mapuat and we had a battle over there at the nudist camp. And we had this fantastic battle, and there was mud people and McGillicuddies and Elf's Imperial Army and the Aunt Fanny's and the Fort Custard Fire Department. And then we had this incredible banquet afterwards with the Wizard of Christchurch, and there was an ice cream fight.
On one side you'd have the Elf's Imperial Army, for example, in their red coats and their smart red and white shields, and on the other side, in this case the McGillicuddy Serious Party, in their kilts and body paint, or maybe a berserker on a chain, and the elves would often have a wizard or two, and McGillicuddies would have some witches, the good witch and the red witch and the black witch. How do you describe pacifist warfare? Blimey. Or non-violent aggression. It's such an obscure concept, really, about posing. But I mean, a lot of traditional warfare was about posing. It wasn't actually about the killing. It was about and I mean, the haka was part of it. I mean, the Aunt Fanny's were classic.
Cup of tea, sugar and milk.
I was a naughty boy. I went from being an Aunt Fanny sewing circle to the McGillicuddy Serious Party and Highland Army, because obviously it was more my style.
It was all about the theatre of the war and the art of war rather than the killing, and to make even death theatrical. Hordes of nurses with their elixir of life, and it's amazing what whiskey will do when you're dead. And the most dramatic, oh, I'm dying, and then along comes the nurse and pours in the whiskey, and it just a mockery of sort of traditional military.
Obviously, Alf's Imperial Army, I think, is sort of a take on that, colonial episodes of the British Empire, which he related to very strongly. He had a statue made of Lord Kitchener in his study at his house.
When he came to us, that was in '97, and he did come via India, and he went to find where my dad had been, and he actually did find Dad's old Batman or whatever they were called, and did meet him. But he was fascinated with the whole Indian Army thing, and I wonder if that was where, probably nothing to do with Alf's, but he did like that military thing, and you wouldn't have thought so, because he was the last person the army would take, and but he'd read and read. He was an absolute mine of information on military, and I didn't know that till we actually got to New Zealand when he died.
Very much a big kid, for sure. Yeah, and then when you got in to see things like Alf's Imperial Army and Aunt Fanny's Tea Party, and we got roped in, and he formed the Alpine Division Regiment for us, and we sat around making paper battens and flower bombs, and went into town and had a big battle on the village green.
What made him unique? I think it was just how he could deal with anything and anyone, and it wasn't about him. He'd totally give, and you didn't feel like not helping or not being involved, or if I'd pick a dad, it would have been a great father to have.
Willie was a great dad. He really was. Like he came from quite a difficult background himself. In England, he came from pretty hard family, hard father, and an upbringing at public school. boarding school. But as a dad, you know, he was fantastic to us. You know, he was fair, he was fun, he was very insightful.
He was great, really enthusiastic. You know, if we wanted to get into something, it was on. We had no issues. He wasn't too concerned with like risk, which is quite good, because you know, not that many parents would let their kids, you know, young teenagers, 12, 13 years old, go out climbing on their own.
He was obviously English because he had an accent, but no, you never thought of him as he was such a Kiwi. You know, because that's the other thing about Willie. You were inspired to do anything because there was no boundaries. It was just, if you could think of it, you could do it, and if you wanted to do it, then it was just process. You know, how do I do this? And that's a very Kiwi attitude. And I mean, the people from all around the world come to New Zealand for that, and some of them manage it, and some of them don't. They get caught up with their past. But he really embraced what it was to be a Kiwi and to be able to do and be how he wanted to be. And I think that for all the time that I knew him, he was being the Willie that he wanted to be.
It was a time when we were maybe pushing the boundaries, living on the edge, and that was, at that time in our lives, that was good fun. Willie was wonderful, had a wonderful attitude about the whole thing.
He had his unique ways of dealing things. So I remember bees was a classic. So we had a lot of problems with bees, and still do with these. And he put some roots up in a little crag in Gorge Creek, the Muslin Wall, and there was some bees or wasps, whatever, bees nests on the roots. And they weren't that big a root, so the way he decided to do it, he went down there one day with a shotgun and just blasted the shit out of these nests. I was like, okay, that's how you, yeah, well, all right.
Other bees' nests at Painsford, sometimes we'd abseil down at night with containers of petrol or CRC, petrol in the hive, and then spray them with CRC with a lighter held in front of them, you know. We're all on these nylon ropes. all just crazy fun, really. It's quite lucky we never had a big fire, I guess.
At this stage, do we issue an apology to Doc here?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. So things went on at Painsford that Doc would not be happy with, and they're in the past, and they were good fun.
Openly, actively encouraged.
There was a ridiculous side to him. He didn't like pretentiousness at all, and so he just really made light of everything. You know, naming climbs, give them silly names, and he'd make up silly nom de plumes for the first ascensionist. You'd have people wondering who the Italian named guy was who had put up this route, when in fact it was Willie, under the name of someone or other Garcia. And
well, that was his eccentricity, I guess. I don't know why he actually decided to operate with all these various nom de plumes, and I think a lot of that was just the mood he was in at the time. I mean, I still have this dilemma of should we change those back to attribute them to Willie or keep them as they originally were.
Yeah, he despised equipment that wouldn't work. You know, if it wouldn't work, he was going to teach it a lesson. And I saw the chainsaw get thrown a few times, but the lawnmower really wouldn't work. He'd had enough of it, so he invited the neighbours round. He took it out to the paddock, out over the picket fence and out into the sheep paddock, and he put 2 sticks of gelignite under it and blew it.
There was a period of time where he was learning to climb, and I'd already been climbing for a few seasons, so I had to sort of teach him how to belay and lead climb, and that was terrible because he was so gung-ho. He took some terrible falls, and would start abseiling. I remember seeing he led up a climb and then was going to wrap down, and he made himself safe and untied and fed the rope through just 2 or 3 or 4 meters. One end wasn't even at the ground yet, and then started to abseil down. And I had to sort of shout up to him as loud as I could to get his attention, because he was just going to abseil off the end of one of the ends of the rope. He was just, couldn't wait to get back down and get on to the next climb.
One of the best ones was when we all went up to the Taka Hill, He organised this, and the Elf's Imperial Army were coming to Golden Bay for the very first time ever. And we knew what time they were coming to Golden Bay, so we got in Willie's truck, and he had organised a generator and had a siren. He bought the siren when they had the Terakoe sale and sold all the stuff from Terakoe Cement Works, and he bought this siren, which was extremely loud. I've still got it, actually. We put food colouring in white wine to make it green and blue, and someone had rolled 100 joints, and we went up there and we had a live chicken. It was one of his ideas. We all wore coats, white coats, and we were the customs and exercise department. And so, of course, we stopped the bus, turned the siren on, and we went into the bus. We had 2 cans of air freshener and went down the bus fumigating, and someone had the chicken under their coat, and when it got to the back of the bus, they let the chicken out and declared the bus foul, and made everybody get off. And once everybody got off, as they were getting off, they were given a glass of green or blue wine and a joint. And every person who got off the bus, including the driver, who obviously didn't partake but thought it was pretty funny anyway, and everyone had to do exercises like press-ups and knee-ups and that sort of thing. And that was our welcome. And again, it was really Willie who instigated most of the idea behind it.
One of the themes of Willie's life was messing about in small boats. Willie always collected random bits of wood and stuff, so the family brought along some special pieces of timber that Willie had collected. And we had a good session up in the workshop and fashioned a jolly boat to send Willie off in.
I heard about the accident through Celia, or the family rang me. It was either Celia or one of the sons, and I didn't get to the hospital, which I always regret, actually. I know he's in a coma, but I just regret never getting there. But I picked his body up in the coffin over in Mott and brought it over the hill, and that was pretty special, very special actually. I'm very honoured to have had that opportunity.
I guess at the funeral I wasn't really confident enough to get up and speak. I just didn't sort of come over me at the time, and I hadn't had a chance to prepare anything. I think the point I would have wanted to make was that he was quite a serious guy too, and he had a lot of interests. He threw himself into a lot of things very deeply at whatever he was doing. Before, when I was very, very young, we lived in Lake Coleridge Sheep Station, and he was a musterer. He had his dogs, and when I look back, that was quite a remarkable thing from a young guy young hippie basically. He was a full-on hippie, come out from England, and somehow he had got himself a team of dogs. He got himself into the high country of the South Island, New Zealand, and he was mustering sheep. So I think it's just important to point out that it's easy to paint a picture of him as a guy who was scatterbrained and all over the place. It really wasn't him. He really was focused on a lot of really good things as well.
Just disappointed that the world can take the beautiful souls and leave the crap behind, and that's the way it is.
I stopped on top of the hill at the lookout and pulled out the whiskey, sat on his coffin, said goodbye. Yeah, it was really upsetting. I got to speak at his funeral, but I just didn't know what to say. It's the first time I'd had someone really close die on me. Yeah.
Just happened to be in Wellington for, I can't even remember why I was there, and I got word that Willie had an accident and was in the intensive care unit in Wellington Hospital, and it was like, oh, I should go and see him, not expecting that I was going to see a man that was dying. And he just looked like Willie still, you know, his long flowing hair. His eyes were open, and he just looked like he would wake up. Still expecting, surprise! You know, just joking. But that didn't happen either, so yeah.
Yeah, I really like, if I'm up in Takaka, to pop out to the East Takaka Cemetery and touch base and say, still thinking of you, Willie, and, you know, life does this to people and the world, and yeah.
Sin cantera, un amasijo hecho de cuerdas y tendones.
It's certainly come a huge way from where it began, obviously. You know, when the guys first rocked up and knocked on the front door, it was just bare paddocks out there. Willie always had in mind his, I think his goals for developing this place anyway, in terms of planting it out to sort of the point that it is now with the trees and things like that.
Well, we knew straight away that we'd have to do something because Mum was not keen on running the camp or having it run from the house any longer. We knew we'd have to have some sort of manager or someone to run the place. It's a mixed blessing, I guess. I mean, it's great that it's been able to be kept going. Initially, I think I ran it for a couple of years, the first year or two after he died. And then Hobie came in. Hobie did 2 years. Hobie was like a crash test dummy for someone outside of the family. And then after that, Troy came in. Troy formalised it a bit more. But he also managed to make it a bit more of a family-friendly place, which is really good and it needed, I think.
I'm from Chilliwack, British Columbia. Lived in Squamish for a few years before coming out here. Learned to climb when I was about 20.
What had you heard about Hangdog before you got here?
I just heard it was started by an absolute lunatic. A lunatic with a really big heart. I heard it was a climber's paradise. That it was a short walk from the crag, something that would make people in Europe with their huge approaches just froth. A lot of people have it on their list. Like, it's such a hot spot. It's not a big mecca like Yosemite or Squamish or Canmore, but it's got something about it. And if you're a climber coming to New Zealand, it's on your list. And it's such a international community over there amongst the vans, like people from all corners of the world.
SCNDING, sending. All you need's a big rock wall.
In terms of numbers, I'd estimate, I mean, if you called it on average 60 people a night through the summer for 3 or 4 months, a few thousand each summer, 25 years now, sort of over 100,000 stays. Obviously, huge amount of return customers. So yeah, there's people who are coming still, who I think have been coming for a long time now, and which is a huge part of the Hangdog culture. So yeah, getting those people who keep coming back and they know the place intimately and they love the vibe.
really nervous.
He hated bongo drummers. Honestly, the quality of bongo drumming that went on around Hangdog was atrocious. So we did two things. One night we went out with just one morning we went out with a bunch of like pots and pans and just started beating them next to people's tents and humming along to it like it was a tune, and people got the point and thought it was funny.
My best memories of them are on Mount Arthur with the grouse hunts. And then I made a lookout on one of the trees that I planted up here, and I had an armchair stuck up in the tree, which I thought was an appropriate thing to do, and you'd sit up there and look at the mountain.
How will we all get along at Hangdog? Now you're both gone.
The other day, I went in to go get a life jacket from Celia's garage, and I see, "Stay the fuck out of my loft, W." There's signatures everywhere, and we'll be finding them for years.